don't know whether the recording has started. I think it has now by Lucy. So I'd like to start the meeting by welcoming you to Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 1, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber at Civic Offices, Angel Street, Bridgend, or from remote locations. I would particularly like to welcome Ellie O'Connell, our Youth Mayor, who will be contributing to today's meeting. Some of you may already be aware that I have a condition called adult onset epilepsy, which occasionally results in me experiencing short absences or mild seizures. On the rare occasions that this may happen in a meeting, you should not be alarmed, and should I as chair experience one of these absences or have any other technical ICT difficulties during the meeting, it has been agreed that Councillor Amanda Williams will step in temporarily as chair during the meeting, and in her absence, Councillor Tim Thomas will step in. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officer to present a brief summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting, as agreed at recent full council meetings. Whether attended in the chamber or remotely, if any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should click the raise hand icon at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. If you are in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. And please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. And please do not use your microphone until the chair invites you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda and item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thanks, Chair. Not so much apologies. I'm afraid I have to leave very sharpish just before 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. The dog. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I give apologies for Councillor Ian Spiller? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rachel Keevins, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Heather Griffiths and Councillor Richard Collins. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. And now proceed to item 2 and declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare any matter on the agenda, please click on the raise hand icon and I will come to you in turn. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I need to declare a personal interest in agenda item number 4 for a number of reasons. Number 1, it includes Brinteg School in the report, and I'm an LEA governor and my 3 children attend there. And secondly, I completed the consultation, but I completed it as a governor, and so it's personal, not prejudicial. I've taken advice from Kelly Watson. And just to clarify that even though I've said I have 3 children, they wouldn't be entitled to any home to school transport, no matter what the options are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor John Paul Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be declaring a prejudicial interest in agenda item 4, the substantive item today, as the previous cabinet member who was one of the ones who authored the report and signed it off subsequently in the end, I deem it appropriate that I would leave the meeting at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blundell. Councillor Tim Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Personal interest, Governor at Ysgol Llangynoed. It's just that I note there's potentially quite a few questions related to item 4 that could permutate towards Welsh medium education. So Governor at Ysgol Llangynoed, but also my one child goes to Ysgol Llangynnoed and one will be joining the school next term.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Delahuse, please.
Personal interest as a governor of Ogmore Primary School.
Thank you very much. I would also like to declare, sorry, Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins first.
Just a declaration that I'm a governor at Comfort Comprehensive School.
Okay, thank you very much. I would also like to declare a prejudicial interest in item 4, the substantive item on the agenda on the learner travel consultation outcome, and I will be leaving the meeting at that stage, before which I will be seeking nominations for a councillor to take my place as the chair of the meeting. So now we move to item 3, and that's the approval of the minutes. Please can I have a mover and a seconder for each set of minutes? And that's the 11th of April 2024.
Moved. Proposed.
Second.
Thank you very much. We now move to item 4, and I would like to seek a nomination and a seconder to take my place as chair for this particular item. Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Can I nominate Councillor Elaine Winstanley, please?
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
I was just put my hand up to second. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Happy with that. More than happy with that. Just some clarity, though. Councillor Elaine Stanley stepped up to the breach of the pre-meeting and we discussed some potential questions. Will we be following that order? Are you aware of the questions, of the question order? Because obviously you couldn't attend.
Councillor Winstanley will have to take the chair. Councillor Thomas,
sorry, misunderstood.
I'll be leaving the meeting for this.
Sorry.
So unless there are any further nominations, I'd like to invite Councillor Winstanley to take the chair in the chamber. And I understand that I'll be kicked out at this stage and I will return at the appropriate time when you've concluded your recommendations on this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I propose that because it's quite a substantive item that we take general questions first and then we'll have detailed questions on the 5 proposals. So can I have indications of who would like to speak on the general questions first?
Yes, you want.
Okay, I've been advised that if the cabinet member or officer would like to speak on this to start the ball rolling, they would be very welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I think Robin Davis, the author of the report, had some opening remarks he'd like to say just to set the report in context, if that's okay, but we keep it very brief.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll just present a very short paper. So the purpose of the report is to inform the committee of the outcome of the public consultation in relation to the local authority's home to school transport policy, for the committee then to consider and agree any recommendations it wishes to make to Cabinet when it meets to consider the matter on the 23rd of July this year. Now, given the timing of the meeting and the meeting of Cabinet on the 23rd of July, the chair of the committee had agreed to make a verbal presentation to Cabinet in respect of any recommendations forthcoming, and I will leave scrutiny officers confirm those arrangements in light of Councillor Winstanley's agreement to act as chair for this particular meeting. So the background to the report is that the local authority has a statutory duty to undertake an assessment of the transport needs of learners under the Learner Travel Wales measure, and then to make suitable transport arrangements to facilitate the attendance of children every day at the place of education, training, which is subject then to eligibility requirements. The local authority has always had a very generous learner travel policy offer beyond the statutory requirements outlined in the Learner Travel Wales measure, with significant support in particular for non-statutory nursery and post-16 learners. However, year on year, the discretionary provision that we've provided has placed significant financial pressure on the local authority, and spend on learner travel has increased from just over 6 million at the end of 2020-2021 to 10.4 million at the end of 2023-24. Now, even though the budget has increased annually, this has failed to meet the rising cost of the provision. There is currently projected an overspend of £1.2 million at the end of this financial year. So in terms of the current situation, a public consultation ran from the 10th of April to the 3rd of July this year, seeking views on 5 policy proposals which are outlined in the report. Those are in section 3 and in the consultation document at Appendix 1, which is on page 25 of the public pack. Response interactions are detailed in table 2 on page 17 of the public pack. Overall, the response rate was good, with engagement with pupils being extremely valuable. The consultation report in Appendix 2 provides further detail, and that's on page 39 of the public pack. Responses to each proposal are detailed in section 3 of the report, and a thematic analysis of the responses is also included at Appendix 3, which is page 81 of the public pack. So in terms of financial implications, it is projected that if implemented, savings of approximately £1 million could be realised annually if these proposals were accepted. However, as cohorts of pupils change annually with different eligibility requirements, this saving is an estimate only. Due to legislation, the earliest any policy change could be implemented would be from September 2025. So in terms of recommendations to the committee, it is recommended that the committee notes the contents of the report and the outcome of the public consultation, that it considers any recommendations that it wishes to make as a committee to Cabinet, which is consistent with the challenge and support role of the Scrutiny Committee. And Chair, if I could, on the basis of the role the Cabinet has in making a decision in respect of any of these proposals, I know that Councillor Martin Jones, as Cabinet Member for Education and Youth Services, would like to conclude my opening remarks by saying a few words about the consultation, the importance of the Scrutiny Committee's challenge and support role in respect of this process, and the decision making by Cabinet in respect to the proposal. So if I could be so bold as to hand over to Councillor Martin Jones just to close my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go over to Councillor Martin Jones, can I just ask all those who are attending online to put their cameras on so that we can see who is in the meeting? That is all those who are attending online to put their cameras on, but keep their microphones muted. Okay, if we can go over to Councillor Martin Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Robin, for introducing the report to us this morning. Well, we have finally, I suppose, reached a point with the learner travel policy and home to school transport where we will have to make some very difficult decisions. And as Cabinet Member, I do not take any pleasure at all in appearing before you today with these proposals, because I'm well aware that the impact of each of these proposals will have on our learners community across the county borough. You will recall, colleagues, that as a previous member of the Scrutiny Committee, we have discussed, debated and looked at this particular policy for quite some time. In the 10 years that I was a member of the Scrutiny Committee, it was certainly on the agenda back then. And if we look back in time, we've had public consultations in 2014, we've had public consultations in 2019, and only recently now in 2024. What I would ask you to consider, colleagues, today is to look at this scrutiny process as a pre-decision opportunity to assist me, officers and Cabinet members in having to make a difficult decision come the next cabinet meeting, which is planned for the 23rd of July next week. And I appreciate the chair's offer to appear before cabinet and present verbally the recommendations or observations you may have today. But I would ask you, if I may, to focus on the 5 proposals that has been presented to you. And I look forward to any feedback, any alternatives, and anything that can assist during the pre-decision process. We have extensively consulted with the public in the last round of consultation processes. We've gone out digitally, online. We've had physical consultation events at various schools. And I'm pleased that there has been a fairly positive response to the consultation, although I accept that there has been a negative response in relation to the proposals. The proposals are there for one reason and one reason only, and that is the driver of the MTFS. All of us as local members will know that there are cuts right across all directorates. So the MTFS essentially dictates the spending and affordability of directorates. And these proposals today will bring us in line with that affordability aspect. So what I'm asking members and our visitors and guests to Scrutiny is look upon this as a pre-decision opportunity. I look forward to your advice and guidance, and I hand it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so on the general points, we've got Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thanks, Temporary Chair. Yeah, two general questions. My first one is that these are quite far-reaching, overarching proposals, and they're going to impact quite a significant number of parents. They could also impact parents and families future down the line, if there's a change in their circumstances. So my first question is, if these proposals are brought forward, how will they be communicated to parents so they understand the implications clearly? The second question, if I may, Chair, is that these proposals are very rigid, and there might be a great number of families and parents that are not impacted by these currently. However, they may be impacted by them further down the line. So, for example, if they had a death in the family, if the family got divorced, if they had ill health, if they lost a job or something like that, or if they had new care responsibilities. If they were impacted further down the line in the future, would those special circumstances be considered in a case-by-case basis? Or would this be a rigid proposal where if you don't meet the geographic criteria, you will be, you won't have the provision? Thanks, Chair.
Are you happy for me to come back in and respond, Chair? Thanks, Councillor Thomas, for those questions. I think the first one is a very good question. Obviously, communication with families, with pupils as well, very important in terms of how the policy will be implemented. Beyond the decision of Cabinet can make a decision on any of the proposals, any of the 5 proposals. We will then amend the policy and seek Cabinet approval for that new policy. The policy must be approved before October the 1st for implementation from September 2025. But we will, we will rely very closely, or work very closely with schools, rather, relying on schools in terms of communication. As part of the consultation, we asked schools to communicate with families, with individual pupils. Every child had a letter sent home via the traditional pupil post, or the more modern technology of texts and systems like class charts to communicate with parents and pupils in terms of how the proposals were affecting them and to encourage responses to the consultation. So we've got a very good relationship with schools through Team Bridgend and through our Monday mail shot, where we ask schools to share information with families. So we'll use those mechanisms. And if there's opportunities, we will go to the schools that maybe are more affected than others to talk to pupils in particular, because we mustn't forget that pupils are the ones that are affected by this, as well as families. Some pupils will be walking to school potentially in the future rather than catching the bus or going in other forms of transport. So there's lots of opportunities for us to communicate with families, and we'll maximise the benefits of all those mechanisms of communication. In terms of your second question and around the rigidity of the policy, our statutory duty doesn't change in terms of us exercising our discretion. So as a local authority, we can still exercise discretion in terms of how we, on a case-by-case basis, as you've suggested, accept applications from families who may be suffering an element of hardship, that perhaps there's a medical reason why their child can't walk to school, or there's another difficulty. So we do at the moment, and we'll continue to accept those applications and process those applications. So our statutory duty in respect of exercising that discretion doesn't change as a result of any decision the Cabinet makes around these 5 proposals.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. I'm now going to call in Councillor Joanna Hopkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start with a generic question, please. So if these proposals all go ahead, it's going to lead to a lot more parents dropping their children off at school. This is already a massive issue. And as we've previously seen, there's been fatal accidents have taken place. So what is going to be done to mitigate the risks to both the pupils and the families, please?
Thank you. Can I call in Robin on this?
Yes, I'm happy to come back in on that one. There's going to be a need for monitoring, I think, the impact of any policy decision, and that's part of our statutory duty around our equalities impact assessment arrangements as well. We know that it's likely that there'll be a significant shift in the dynamics around how children get to school. That quantum will change annually as the cohort changes. We're talking about 2 academic years in time, because we're still in the 23-24 school year, and this will be the start of the 25-26 school year. So we will need to look at, in particularly, the impact of some of these policy proposals, how they impact the local environment around schools with communities. We're aware that it will lead to potential congestion, higher risk. We will work closely with our colleagues in highways around some of those concerns. And we'll obviously monitor and utilise the resources available to us as a local authority to ensure that where possible we are minimising that risk, and obviously working closely with schools to communicate to parents some of those issues and the benefits around active travel and children walking to school where possible. But we are conscious that this is likely to lead to some of the issues that you've suggested, Councillor, and those are outlined for Cabinet in the report that will be presented next week. But I think at this point in time, it is too early to say what the detail of that impact might be, and it will vary across each school, and 60 schools, and the picture will look very different. But not every school has significant school transport. So at the moment there's only 22 schools that really there's any significant school transport, and the majority of the big buses are isolated to a small number of primary schools and 7 or 8 of the secondary schools. So we'll need to utilise the resources available to us, monitor and react accordingly, and work with colleagues across the local authority to ensure that mitigation, if we can identify suitable mitigation, we'll be putting it in place.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins?
Yeah, yes, please, Chair. I understand that you said you're going to monitor the situation, but monitoring the situation may come too late. There may already be a fatal accident that you have to deal with before any, while you're monitoring the situation. I'm really worried about this, I've got to say.
I obviously note your comments. It's and I accept there's the concern. I can only assure you that obviously that as an education directorate, supporting schools, we want to make sure our learners are safe. And if schools have a very important role in supporting this agenda. As I said, we'll be working closely with them and families. I think communication is critical here. Working to ensure that pupils and families are educated in terms of the issues around schools. But we see these issues already. So these won't be new issues, but there potentially could be an increase in the quantum, if you like. But that's all I can promise you, Councillor, is that we can, we'll use the resources available to us to ensure that, where the data is telling us that we need to act very quickly, that we will do so.
Thank you. I've been very remiss in not welcoming invitees, the head teachers, as well to this meeting. I see one has indicated to speak. Helen Jones, would you like to comment on this issue, or is there something else that you'd like to raise?
I'll speak on this issue when it's pertinent, and I'm happy to do that. I'm here for a reason. Just to say, I've driven to a friend's house because the internet has gone down in the whole of the Maesteg area. So I am so desperate to contribute to today. I'm basically squatting until I go back to school after this meeting. So I'm more than happy to contribute, but obviously, Councillor, I can't see names on my phone. I'm squinting. Had his hand up before me. So please bring me in whenever you think it's pertinent.
Thank you. In that case, I know Councillor Amanda Williams has got a number of questions that she'd like to raise, so I'll bring her in and then we'll go to the Cabinet Member. Oh, okay. Councillor Martin Jones, did you want to speak on this issue?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm well aware that there are going to be a number of unintended consequences if these proposals are agreed by Cabinet. And we've already identified a number of unintended consequences. For example, if the post-16 travel policy was to be changed, would this be an increase in NEET? For example, those young people who may perhaps quite caught up in NEET. Would there be an increase in absenteeism? Would there be an increased issues across all our schools, rightly identified by Councillor Joanna Llewellyn Hopkins, of vehicle traffic outside our schools? And of course, we have to consider employment. There are people employed within the travel industry within the County Borough of Bridgend who may very well lose their jobs as a result of these new policy changes. But the commitment I'll give to this committee, and it is something which we discussed previously with officers, and I have to say there is an appetite but from Nicola and Chances and Robin Davies, and I haven't spoken to the director yet, but I'm sure there will be an appetite from the director to do so, for me to chair a monitoring group to see what the impact these policy changes are making. And from a cabinet perspective, bringing in those other directorates if there is a need. For example, if we feel that there is an increase in vehicle traffic outside particular schools, then we will engage with our colleagues in the Highways Department from Communities Directorate, and that's within my gift as a cabinet member to bring these people, the experts, the people who can make a difference for us. And for example, if we find that there are families who are particularly struggling financially, then we could look at the Social Services Directorate and see whether or not we can support there. But the clear message I want to get across is, please don't think that if Cabinet make this decision on the 23rd, we're just going to walk away and look for the next problem. This is a problem that's going to be with us for quite some time. It's going to need monitoring. It may need intervention. But that is where I will come from, and I will lead on that. And if there is intervention to be considered, then I will lead on that. And I think the big secret for me will be to lead, but bringing in cross directorates to support that particular issue, because I'm well aware that the impact this will have not only on families and communities and school, but the wider public in the county borough, like I said previously, in terms of those who may very well lose their jobs. So hopefully, Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins and other members in the chamber, if you have any other associated views or concerns regarding absenteeism or NEET, these will all be captured during that monitoring process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think we want to press on, so I'm going to ask Councillor Amanda Williams for her general observations.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 3 questions that are general questions. They're quite short questions, so I'll read them all out in one go, if that's okay. Firstly, is there an update in catchment areas? Because I know we've had in the past, we've discussed catchments in this committee, and the need for buses would be less if we were to review the catchment areas in some places. Also, second question, have we got an update on Welsh Government's plans? Because they were due a couple of years ago to review home to school transport, and we keep being told that this is on hold or it's delayed. So do we have an update there? And then thirdly, when are our contracts up for review? Because it's linked into the previous question. We've been told we can't sell empty places on buses because of the terms of the contracts we've got with our suppliers at the moment. So when is that? When are they up for review, and is there an option to look at that going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. And who would like to take those questions?
I'm happy to come back on those, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. In terms of update on the catchment areas, the only update I can provide is around the work that's ongoing currently to identify the potential for Welsh medium schools having their own catchment areas, because currently they don't. So the so-called catchment areas for Welsh medium primary schools, principally because as we've only got one Welsh medium secondary school, essentially the county borough is the catchment area. There hasn't been any progress on catchment area, reviewing catchment areas for the English medium schools at this time, but that is still something that we are aware of, that we need to progress, particularly some of the issues around some of the boundaries, which has impacted eligibility for school transport in the past, but that would have to follow Cabinet's decision and the outcome of the creation of Welsh medium catchment boundaries as part of the work of the Welsh Education Forum. In terms of Welsh Government's policy agenda around the Learner Travel Wales measure, that was announced back in August 2020, and more recently Welsh Government did report, and I suppose they hadn't concluded essentially the original agenda, which was outlined at the time by the then Minister for Education, which was potentially looking at the statutory distances and also post-16 transport eligibility. they have reported to some extent, but it doesn't impact the agenda that local authorities are progressing, include obviously Bridgend. So there's no change to essentially to national policy that has been reported by Welsh Government, just further work in the future. So I think the original intention was to potentially change the legislation, but that hasn't been forthcoming. And in terms of contracts, that's all I would say is our contracts are wide and varied. We have about 325 contracts altogether, and they're all at different contracted at different times. So there's not one set of contracts, there's multiple contracts, and we're currently going through a procurement exercise at the moment for a range of contracts. So they are sort of spread over a number of years, all of different time periods and different opportunities to extend those contracts in line with the original award. And I think you were alluding to the impact then of the public service vehicle accessibility regulations in terms of pay in places, whether or not we could build into future contracts the option of pay in places. And I would say at this stage that isn't going to be something that we could build in because of the requirements that operators have to invest in a change of fleet and the significant cost around that they would then pass on to the local authority. And the whole agenda is about making efficiency savings and reducing costs, when we know that the impact of the PSVR, if we were to try to embed those in our existing contracts, the costs would be exponentially increased. So it would be contrary to the whole agenda around us trying to make efficiencies. And in the past, I think the maximum number of pay in places we've ever had before the impact of the PSVR was about 18, and that won't pay for the increase in the contract price to the local authority. So I would say at this time it's not something that we would wish to pursue, and it would essentially price us out of the market. So I hope those responses address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was illuminating, because I didn't realise about some of those issues, so thank you for that. Okay, I'm now going to bring in Helen Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to give you an introduction as to why I thought it was pertinent that I was here today, and because my Steg school has been impacted by the adoption of the policy. So in 2019, my Steg school had 7 buses bringing children from either end of the valley to the school, courtesy of the local authority. And pupils used to be permitted to have access to free homeschool transport within 2 miles. And when we returned to school from the pandemic, pupils new to the school or without siblings or moving to the next stage of their education were not issued with bus passes. And obviously that's had a year-on-year impact, so that now in 2024 we have 2 buses bringing the children to school, and next year we've been told we will only have 1. Now, obviously, I want to share with you, I'm not here to try and change your mind or give you emotional arguments, and I'm here just to show the data that we have had to agonise over. And we are satisfied that there is a direct correlation between the withdrawal of transport for all learners from an available walking route to school, within that statutory distance of 3 miles, and the following areas, which have already been identified as fear factors in the response to the consultation: whole school attendance, punctuality, the increase in the cost of the school day substantially, reduction in the number of pupils returning to our 6th form or remaining in full-time education, and a significant increase in traffic in the school area at the start and end of the day. And as I said, I think we're very proud in my Steg of the fact that from 2017 to 2019, we were never out of quartile 1 or 2 for attendance. So in 2019, school attendance was 94%. And that's with an FSM percentage of around 23–24%. The difference between my FSM pupils and my non-FSM pupils in 2019 was 3.1%. That's a really small margin. We were always identified by Welsh Government as being extremely successful in this area. Go to 2024, my whole school attendance is now 85.9%, which is well below Welsh national average. We've always been above it. And the gap between my free school meal pupils and my non-free school meal pupils is 9.1%, the widest it's ever been. And it doesn't fill me with any pride to state that my school is the lowest attending school in the borough. We have never, ever been in that situation. I believe the highest attending school in the borough has nearly all of their pupil population transported by free transport. And you can guess which school that is. So I couldn't be satisfied that we had to look at the reasons why. And obviously we've done that to death. So when we examine the attendance by postcode, we can see that our most socially deprived areas have the lowest attendance. That doesn't take a genius to work that out. And it's in line with national trends since COVID. So the postcodes, I'm going to talk about Caira specifically. It is our largest catchment area. It is our most disadvantaged and deprived area. And it is the furthest away from the school, which is perfect combination. So the Caira average attendance is 82%. The whole school, those postcodes not including Caira, is 86.7%, which is a gap of nearly 5% difference. What I was also keen to do when I had the part of a thematic review for attendance with Estin, which I'll reference later. But if you can just humour me for a moment, I had to be assured that transport was the impact, not just COVID, post-pandemic and poverty. So we've analysed the data quite closely. So in 2017, the attendance of pupils living in Caira was 93.5%. That was when they were all bussed into school. That was just 0.6 percentage points, not even a percentage point below the whole school average. In 2023, this was last year, not this academic year, but the previous academic year, attendance in Caira was 80.1%, which was 3.3 percentage points below the whole school average. And what we worked out, that the average rate of decline over 6 years from areas where pupils have always walked to school, so we're taking into account the average decline post-COVID, was 8.3%. So we're basically attributing about 8 percentage points dip in attendance as a result of COVID over 6 years. Okay, I hope keeping up with me. I've lived and breathed this. And we can attribute that to COVID, post-COVID or post-pandemic parental attitudes to education. The rate of decline in Caira for the same period, 6 years, was 14.7 percentage points. And it had to be more than just the pandemic. Whereas every other area improved their attendance from 2022 to 2023, this area didn't see any improvement. So I am satisfied that the most detrimental impact on attendance to our most impoverished catchment area is as a result of the new transport. I say not new transport, it is the increase from 2 to 3 miles. The cost of the school day, something that Lynn Neagle has been talking about recently in her opening speeches. The school's largest catchment area of Caira, as you know, is our most deprived and is now the most deprived in Wales. There's limited access to private transport. There are only 2 buses that get to school or anywhere near at school time. There is one at 7:36 and that gets to the school at 7:48. Our school day starts at 8:40, so it'd be fine. We could accommodate them in Breakfast Club. And there's one at 8:36 that gets to the school at 8:48, which obviously makes them late for school. The daily return price is £3. And if a family were to buy a weekly pass, it is £15.60. That's at the discounted rate for 11 to 16. It's significantly more for those children or those post-16 sixth form students who currently travel to college for free, but don't have free transport to school. In 2018, the attendance of Caira pupils compared to, sorry, I'm repeating myself there. Okay. We have had a slight decrease in pupils returning to the sixth form. And I think the worry for us is because we're on a train line direct to Cardiff, Cardiff and the Vale offer free transport via train to their college. And what we have seen in recent years is because the bus takes so long to get to Bridgend and is nearly always full with people who work. Nearly everybody who lives in my stag works in Bridgend. The bus to school that would get our pupils to school on time very often drives past them as it's full. So there's insufficient transport infrastructure to support the removal of free transport. I think what I would say is Estyn recognised this, and it is a Welsh Government policy. It's not something the local authority have made up. It is a Welsh Government policy, and they need to accept responsibility for this policy, because when I've spoken to them at length about the frustrations that the impact this policy is having on poor areas, I know there's an equality assessment that has to be done. Poverty is not a protected characteristic. Poverty is not an issue that needs to be considered when producing these equality assessments, which is a concern for somebody serving an area that has 38% free school meals. And Caer itself is close to 64% free school meal. So Estyn recognises, and in its thematic report that was produced in January 2024, which talks about improving attendance in secondary schools, there are 3 bullet points I wish to draw to your attention. The first is we have identified a number of important barriers that schools faced when tackling poor attendance, increasing costs associated with school transport being one of them. The second, it is clear that although schools have an important role in improving attendance, they cannot tackle this issue alone. Improving attendance will require a multi-agency and cross-service approach alongside support from Welsh Government. And they actually make a recommendation to Welsh Government here that says, consider how pupils living within the 3-mile radius who are not eligible for free transport could be better supported to attend school more regularly. Lynn Neagle addressed head teachers and anyone associated with attendance in a conference in July, and she wanted to remove the stigma of poverty through looking at the cost of the school day. Reuben Kelman, who is the leader of the Welsh Youth Parliament, who attends school in Llynishon, well supported by a good transport infrastructure in Cardiff, also spoke about concerns of the cost of his school day, particularly with regard to transport, and raised the point that it had a significant impact on his well-being and attendance. And then Sir Alistair MacDonald has stated non-attendance is not just about schools and what schools can do, it is about things such as even getting to school. So, I want to show you the analysis that we have done to try and understand the barriers. We've never been in such a challenging situation in my stag, and the frustration, I suppose, or the difficulty for us is trying to think creatively and innovatively outside of the box to see how we can get pupils to school. And I suppose it goes without saying that the most vulnerable families do not have access to free school, to additional transport. They don't have access to car share even. And it's, £15 a week when I have families of 3 is proving very, very difficult and completely impossible. So that's just what I wanted to leave you with, to show the impact that the policy has already had. And I think it's quite difficult. It's going to be exceptionally difficult for the Cabinet under Councillor Jones to try and monitor these things, because we've had, well, since 2019, we've seen a slow deterioration. I am pleased to report that attendance is improving. As families, I suppose, have accepted what's happening. It's a slow progress, but our year 7, for example, is, although it's our highest achieving year group, it is still significantly below Welsh average. And one of the biggest issues cited to us regularly is not being able to get to school. I will say taxi companies are making a fortune out of people living in Caer because they are car sharing via taxis, and I think that's £20+ a week, because the £15 a week bus isn't proving to be reliable. So I will leave you with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can, but just wanted to share those findings with you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful, actually, because it actually shows the impact of what past changes have made. And obviously, we're also very keen to see attendance improve, and obviously, the impact of transport on that has been well illustrated by what you've said.
Thank you.
But yes, anyone who wants to start a taxi firm in Caer, that they would have quite a lot of take up. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to now move to the proposal 1 so that we can start to group specific questions and make sure that we cover everything that we need to do. This is the withdrawal of legacy transport for all learners benefited from an identified safe route to school to fall in line with the statutory distances of 2 miles for primary school age pupils and 3 miles for secondary school pupils. So can I have invite people to ask questions on proposal 1? Thank you. So I'll first go over to Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question's regarding safe route to school. I'd like to know, how is a route deemed as safe, please?
Happy to come back on that one, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins. It's a good question. The Learner Travel Wales measure has an associated document called the Learner Travel Statutory Provision and Operational Guidance, and in that there's detailed step-by-step processes and additional guidance for local authorities in how the local authority should determine an available walking route to school, which is the proper way we say it. Although to the public, it essentially means, is it safe for my child? There's a combination of assessments based on statistical data around accidents, around traffic counts, but also in terms of the physical makeup of a route, whether the route is paved, whether it's lit, whether there's any seasonal variations in terms of the impact on that route, in terms of potential for flooding, etc. So it's a very detailed document that identifies how the local authority should assess those routes. Back in 2015-16, and I think the work concluded over a period of about 2 years, we engaged with an independent consultant to assess the majority of all the main arterial routes across Bridgend, and they independently assessed on our behalf the availability of those routes. So they produced them for us, a series of documents identifying those routes in detail with all the statistical information, as I've mentioned, and the assessments identifying whether they were or were not available. So we've had those routes, that route information for quite some time now. So this policy proposal is about ensuring that we actually utilise that information, given the significant financial investment we made at the time, to ensure that we are being fair and all pupils across Bridgend are being treated equally. And it's quite clear that some pupils on available walking routes at this point in time are still getting school transport where their peers in other areas of the county borough are not. So this proposal it's less about changing the policy, it's more about how we implement existing policy and utilise the information available to us as a local authority. And I would say, actually, I'm not aware of any other local authority in Wales who's invested as we have in those types of assessments independently and quite formally in line with the guidance I mentioned earlier on, the statutory provision operational guidance. So we are very confident in those assessments. And I think if there's a follow-up question about, well, that was going back sort of 6 or 7 years ago, things may have changed. There's no duty on us to do an annual update. There's no duty on us to the local authority essentially determines the timeliness of an update to any assessment, and we work with colleagues in Highway, so we are obviously aware from information provided to us by colleagues in Highways of any changes to some of the sort of the urban realm, and whether we need to take that into consideration, or whether there's accident black spots, for example, that may need to impact a reassessment perhaps of an available walking route. but that information is available. There's detailed guidance, and we've followed it very strongly in Bridgend, and I think we're in a good position now to implement.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to call on Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you. Did Ellie want to come in from the pre-meet? We discussed maybe she wanted to come in first before me, because my question ties in nicely with what she had to say.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, I'll bring in our invitee, Ellie O'Connell.
My question is, how are we going to keep, based on concerns from the Youth Council, how are we going to keep these spaces safe due to changes in the weather or changes in the season, especially in the winter when it gets dark earlier? A lot of young people feel scared walking home in the dark, and it usually gets dark around 4:30, I'd say. So what are we going to do to ensure those spaces stay safe for them to be able to walk home?
Thank you. Can I bring in Robin on that?
Yeah. Thanks, Ellie. A very good question, and those remarks came through strongly with the Youth Council, as you'll be aware. But also when we visited the schools and spoke to pupils, there was a lot of strong feelings around the seasonal changes, as I've already mentioned, in terms of weather, light. Just concern about walking home in the dark as an individual pupil, and all those things were taken into consideration when we undertook those route assessments, and at the time we undertook the physical assessment of the routes, there was also a significant consultation exercise which contributed to the consideration of whether those routes were going to be considered as available or safe or not. I think some of the points that people have raised about, well, when I get to school and it's been raining, I've walked 2-3 miles, I'm wet. What do I do? Do I just sit in the school wet, having walked that distance through all the different types of weathers? Those are things, as I thought, local authority, as we've mentioned, we will need to kind of monitor and respond to. And those are issues that came up in the previous consultations that Councillor Jones mentioned earlier on in 2014 and 2019. So I think, there's potential opportunities for us to work with schools to look at, things like, is there somewhere to dry my coat? Is there somewhere I can change? Those types of things. Not ideal. I'm not saying that's something that would replace the provision of school transport. It won't. But I think just to provide you with some assurance, we've undertaken the assessments. We've considered, in line with that statutory guidance, the impact on learners, and where we feel a route isn't safe or available, we've said it's not available, and therefore school transport will be provided. And we'll continue to look at those route assessments and continue to work with schools and pupils over those concerns and the impact on individuals. But going back to the point Helen has just made, head of my stake school, these changes are happening incrementally year on year, and there are pupils that walk 3 miles to secondary schools and 2 miles, up to 2 miles to primary schools already. We've got 4,300 pupils on school transport, but there's another 19,000 that aren't. So I know, and there are alternative ways that they get to school, whether it's walking, cycling, or parents taking them. So just my assurance that your points are very valid. We are conscious of them. That information came out strongly in the consultation, the concerns of pupils, and that is something I'm sure Councillor Jones and the rest of Cabinet will be taken into consideration in the decision-making process next week.
Thank you. And can I bring in Councillor Martin Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want Helen Jones to feel that her contribution hasn't gone unnoticed. So if you would permit me, Chair, just to provide a response to Helen. Helen, thank you for your very detailed response, very forensically presented to us. And I think from my perspective, I'm aware that this particular policy affects our ability to get children and young people into educational establishments. And I'm very minded, of course, that there is capability and capacity issues within schools and colleges who are running deficit budgets. So there's a toxic mix here in relation to how we in the county borough try to provide the best possible education to our young people. And I fully accept there is a political dimension to this. I get it. It is a political, but it's how best we collate, capture what is happening in Bridgend and present that to colleagues in Welsh Government. And I'm more than happy to explore options for us moving forward. For example, if we were to invite the Minister to Bridgend, we are equipped, conditioned to present our case. And I think the key for me is linking it to the Estyn inspection processes, because there's no doubt Estyn are going to have a template of inspection. They're going to identify these issues. And unless we can get a corporate sort of response from Welsh Government, I'm afraid I don't want school leaders to feel to be isolated. And that's the thing for me. This is a corporate issue for us in the County Borough of Bridgend. I think it's a Welsh issue, and it's how best we tackle the political dimension of it all. So my reassurance to you and to our colleague from Nottingham Primary School as well is we will sit down, we will look at areas how we can explore moving forward and take our representations to the highest level at Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to ask Councillor Amanda Williams if she'd like to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a number of questions here. Some of them have been touched upon. I want to briefly raise about the well-being of future generations as well in this, even though I've got a question, a specific one at the end of the report as well. So I think Robin said, my first question was, when were the last risk assessments carried out? I think he said 6 to 7 years ago. So, but that there wasn't a general update on this. Now, my ward has had significant development since then. So I wondered, are there actually updates where you've had significant development? Because routes change. A lot of children move in from another area and they don't know the area, particularly if you're building all the way across to school. We've had a number of cases where children are being given routes that lead them through isolated streets, not main roads. And I wouldn't want my 11, 12-year-olds walking through a street, you know, a little street where they're out of sight for most people. So I've had inconsistency with some of the safe walking routes that have been sent to me via residents, and I've challenged each of them and they have been picked up. But concerns for me are the lack of maintenance of verges along some of these safe routes, trying to get the hedgerows cut, you're told, when resources allow. But if it's pushing children to walk onto roads and that is their safe route to school, that's no longer safe. For 2.5 years, I've been arguing between BCBC and Persimmon who owns lights on the footbridge over to Litchard Park. As Ellie said, in the winter it's dark. Those lights haven't worked for years. And yet that's the safe route for children to walk to Bryn Teg. These things need picking up. So I would like Martin, as he said, he would put chair some working group to look at all of these issues, to include these sorts of issues and link into other directorates if possible. When he does that, examples, Litchard, top of Litchard is just inside 3 miles. Children, you've mentioned, Robin, about children walking 3 miles to school in the rain, turning up soaking wet. In Bryn Teg, it's a split school. Those children then walk for the whole day in their wet clothes, soaking wet, from classroom to classroom to classroom. They haven't got the luxury of one of our new builds. Like in Coity, the school in my ward, and Litchard is all in one as well. So the well-being of these children, we've had parents saying they won't send their children to school on a wet day because they're going to be ill, because they're going to be soaked by the time they get in, wet all day. We've had others say they can't afford to pay for 5 days of bus fares, so they only send the children in on certain days. And I think we need to look at all of that and ensure that we're picking all of this up. Again, we're asking children to walk 3 miles, and sometimes we haven't got crossing points. We haven't got our crossing patrol people to help them cross the road. We haven't got the Litchard Cross, for example. It's the main route to the hospital. Ambulances flying through there, and there is no buttons on those traffic lights for children for pedestrian crossing points there, and yet they're having to cross there every day to and from school. And I've done some research, and experts say that a 12-year-old cannot tell the speed of a car. We've already had a man killed at the top of that road, an elderly man crossing to catch the bus, and children can't tell the speed. So I think we need to put more work into safe routes to schools. And I've raised every year safe routes in my ward to say that children I know are getting a bus because there is no safe route to school. Children who can see the school from their houses. For example, Heel Spencer, there's no footpath up there, so those children are entitled to a free school bus even though they can see the school because there is no footpath. So I think we need to invest in other areas and look, if we're going to remove the buses. You've built a road halfway into town from Park Derwin, from Coity, but it's stopped and there's no lights on that road. So if you completed the link, there would be half the time I would have expected for children to get to school. So the other concern I've got is the paid buses. There's a lot of children use paid buses to Bryn Teg. These paid buses are doing other school runs first, and children are then waiting, and sometimes until 4 o'clock, to get the bus because they're waiting for the bus to come from another route first. Teachers are waiting in the rain with them because they don't want to leave them waiting. So I think for us to remove this, I think there are a number of issues that I think we need to get right to make sure that our children and their well-being is the priority here. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some really good points which I think will feed into our recommendations later on. I don't know if there's anything specific that anyone wants to come back on at this point.
If I could just come back very briefly on 1 or 2 points that Councillor Williams mentioned, as well as the monitoring exercise that Councillor Martin Jones mentioned earlier on, and also I referenced. We also have the Schools Transport Advisory Group that Councillor Williams may be familiar with. That's the group of officers from across the local authority that consider the transport and traffic issues immediately outside schools, but also within schools as well in terms of safety. Some of the points that Councillor Williams has mentioned around things like lack of maintenance of verges, I'm more than happy to kind of progress that with officers, because officers from highways, health and safety sit on that group together with Lindsay Harvey, who's the chair as corporate director, and those are important points. Councillor Williams is mentioning, you know, the maintenance of some of these routes and the prioritisation around some of the maintenance and how we can join up some of the issues around active travel and the investment in terms of active travel links, which is a separate funding stream, obviously, which comes from bids to Welsh governments. Much of that, I think, there's an opportunity to work far closer around moving forward, given the potential impact of the policy proposals if they were implemented. So I think, you know, without mentioning anything else, some of the points that Councillor Williams made with comments, not specific questions, but I think they were all valid. But just my reassurance to her that in terms of those points, we'll take them forward via the most appropriate mechanism following any decision of Cabinet on these proposals. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm now going to call in Helen Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of making myself extremely unpopular, it's just for clarification, really, that I can go back to my governors and my community. There's a lot of talk about will monitor once this policy is implemented, but obviously it's already been enacted in my stag. What monitoring has gone on or communication with school leaders to find out the impact of this and to monitor, as we've said, you will monitor. I mean, we've been affected by this since 2019 or 2020, 4 years. So can I ask what's been done?
The difficulty, Helen, has been that because of the way the policy has been changed, particularly around the in-receipt and the sibling protection, it's been very difficult on an annual basis to see the incremental change in the impact of the policy, because it's been very slow. I mean, the policy was actually approved in 2015, so it was 9 years ago that policy was changed by Cabinet, and the implementation began then in September 2016. So, it's 8 years ago. It's a significant period of time, and the change has been relatively slow. So whilst I think, you've identified your own analysis around my stake, and, I can't comment on that, because I suppose that's the analysis that you've undertaken. It's not a local authority analysis. I think one of the things that we've just been mindful of is that we've noticed perhaps impact at a much slower rate. So, year in, year out, we've not seen any significant change to cohorts, although if you look back 8 years, you can see that difference. So, but I think with this particular policy proposal, or these policy proposals, the impact will be fundamental at the point in time. So from September 2025, there will be a much more significant impact at that point, because it's being implemented. The proposal is that it's implemented from that time and not phased over what has been, given the current policy, a relatively long period of time. So I think, what we're identifying is, we know that change would come very quickly given the policy implementation date, and on that basis we should be able to make some association with that policy change and what then happens in schools and in respect of the journey to school.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the key thing is you're absolutely right. It's my analysis because nobody else has done it. That data is evidence there for anybody to use, and it would have been great to have had the opportunity to work in partnership to show the impact. And the implementation of the policy was absolutely just after COVID, when people were not reissued with bus passes. So there was a definitive date that we can go back to. So that I would really welcome that. I think it's absolutely essential that school leaders are involved in this, because we use data intelligently and forensically to be able to inform the decisions that you make. So I think I welcome any involvement of school leaders to inform those decisions.
Thank you. And I think we'll be pulling something in our recommendations on that and monitoring it going forward. Thank you. Okay, before we go on to the next proposal, I think we'll just call for a 10-minute break, comfort break. So we'll be back at 12:25. Thank you.